Check.
You're not supposed to have
Nonetheless,
followed.
he followed up already, so
Okay.
oh, that was nice.
If I can ask everyone to take their seats, we are not, oh, actually, let me strike that. If I can ask everyone who would like coffee to get it now. I have a habit, because it is difficult to park and get through security, of starting these meetings promptly at 10:05, and I will continue my practice. You have a 5-minute grace period only, because you have to get through security. And sometimes there's a line. So if you would like coffee, you have about 1:10 left before I call the meeting to order. Did any? I have not heard from priests and
No.
service.
No.
We're all over previously.
Nothing.
Okay.
Silence.
Hour of 10:05 having arrived, I would like to call this meeting to order, and I would like to ask Karen Pinnell to read the roll call of the WAB.
Senator Steve Geller,
Here.
Vice Mayor Sandra Welsh, Commissioner Andrea McGee,
Greg, do we know, are people online able to respond, or?
They're going to be typing.
Okay. Well, we'll hold the roll call just for a moment.
I have Vice Mayor Welch.
Okay.
Commissioner Andrea McGee, Commissioner Doug Bell, Commissioner Denise Grant, Commissioner Kevin Biederman,
He's
Here.
here? I see him.
Here.
Okay.
Commissioner Mary Molina McPhee, Commissioner Nancy Mateer, Commissioner Rhonda Eaton,
Is she present? She normally attends
gonna be
virtually. Okay, thank you.
thank you. Commissioner Tim Ryan, Commissioner Tom Good,
I'm here.
Councilmember Jim Albritton, Councilmember Susan Starkey,
Here.
Jean Goldman, Governing Board Member Ron Bergeron,
I have Jalen March here online for Governing Board Member Convert.
Kevin Hart,
Present.
Mark Peterson,
Here.
Mayor Greg Ross,
Mayor Ross will be, I don't know if he has officially done so, but has told me that he will be resigning because as president of the Florida League of Cities, he's attending so many functions that he will be resigning from both this and the South Florida Regional Planning Council.
thank you. Mayor Michelle Gomez,
Please show Commissioner Rhonda Eaton here.
Rhonda Eaton, thank you. Mayor Anthony Caggiano,
Present.
One less longer. Okay.
Mayor Aisha Gordon,
Do we have a quorum?
you have a quorum.
Thank you. I will comment that I have discussed with Dr. Gerardo that we will be speaking or have spoken with the Broward County League of Cities. There are a number of League of Cities representatives that have been appointed by the Broward League to the WAB that simply aren't attending, and I'm asking that they be removed and replaced so that we can, if you would like to be attending, we want to have you. If you're not going to be attending, you know, our bylaws do say that you're removed after you miss 3 meetings, but since we don't actually do the appointing, we haven't really been following that.
I'll make
Councilmember
sure I
Starkey.
follow up with them on that, because I know that we've had that in the past, years ago, and then we were able to get good appointments in that attended on a regular basis, as I've been hearing you for a number
Right.
of years, and it's the consistency that we want to see.
Exactly.
So if somebody, you know, I don't want to just give an appointment to this board when somebody's not really into it.
There are a number of people that I think in the cities that would be very interested in what
Yes.
we're doing, and therefore I think it's important. I mean, we have, as I look around this room, a lot of dedicated municipal representatives. And so we need more of those and less of people that have been appointed but haven't been to a meeting in 6 months.
Right. I'll have them send a letter out to all the city officials to see if there's somebody who's actually interested in and qualifies.
I appreciate that. Dr. Harada?
And thank you, Commissioner Starkey. I know you've always been really helpful in pursuing those appointments. We have spoken with Mary Lou, and she has the full list of attendance, and I can forward that over to you.
Yes.
And she had indicated that she thought we might have some new appointments by now, so your follow-up would be really helpful. Thank you. And the last time, though, there was a little bit of confusion about making appointments without notifying the current members that they were no longer needed in service. So there
Oops.
will need to be both, and they both have to come through the league because, as Senator Geller shared, the county is not the appointing entity.
Well,
So to
hopefully,
that-
hopefully nobody that didn't show up on a regular basis was complaining that they were being replaced.
If they do, call me, I'll tell them they're off. But anyway,
We, for the record, we will be appointing Commissioner Starkey as Sergeant at Arms.
There's no,
yeah,
Yes,
better
but
with
that-
sugar though.
right, yes.
there's no line item in our creation that is an automatic removal if you miss a certain number of
There
meetings?
is. It says if you miss 3 meetings, but we haven't, we can remove them, but we can't replace them, which is why we haven't removed them. We've asked the league, the appointing authority, the League of
Okay.
Cities, to remove and replace them.
Okay.
So will you be sending also a letter that, since they've missed the attendance requirements, to the individuals?
Dr. Harada?
Typically, that is all managed through the league.
Okay.
But we can certainly provide the formal communication, but it does need to be managed by the league.
Okay, no worries.
On the other county boards, which are appointed by county commissioners, we just remove them and instruct it. But since we don't do the appointments, it's a little different. Mr. Bell?
Yeah, I just wanted, I missed the roll call, so,
I have you.
We caught you.
and also my name thing is missing over there for whatever reason.
It was an act of deliberate sabotage.
That's what I figured.
All right, please call, Karen, please call the roll of the TAC.
Kevin Hart,
Present.
Randolph Brown,
Online.
Albert Carbon, Alan Garcia,
Bodman online from University.
Brett Butler. Commissioner Doug Bell.
Here.
David Walker. Dawn Tietzel.
I have Ms. online.
Giovanni Battista. Heather Cuniff. Isabel Cosier Carballo.
I have Haley Lazzaroni online from Ms. Carballo.
Jeff Jang. Dr. Jennifer Gerardo.
It was not an act of deliberate sabotage.
Commissioner Bell.
Jose Lopez. Lisa Milenkoff. Milenkovich. Sorry. Patrick Davis. Thank you. Peter Kwiatkowski.
I have Mr. Jalen Martier from Mr. Kwiatkowski.
Thank you. Rafael Frias. Thank you. Renuka Mohammed.
I have Ms. Muhammad on.
Stephanie Pearson. Steve Holmes. Suzanne Meckler. Talil Abikaram. Tim Welsh.
Is there a quorum
12,
present, or you're
13,
not
14.
sure?
We do have a quorum.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Please show that there is a quorum present for both the web and the TAC. At this point in time, I am hereby opening the public comment period. Is there anybody present in person that wishes to make any public comment? Seeing none, is there any person present online who has any public comment? Okay, please show the public comment period closed. At this point in time, I would ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Well, it says it's the meeting minutes of November 3rd, so that can't be correct. 'Cause that's now.
That's now.
Right.
That would be from September 8th.
Okay.
Right, September 8th. Yeah.
So.
I'll make the
it's
motion to approve.
Moved by Commissioner Caggiano. Is there-
Second.
Nancy, who seconded? Okay. By Kevin Hart. Discussion, are there any objections or corrections? Any objections or corrections? If not, is there any opposition? Any opposition? If not, show it adopted unanimously. Under Roman numeral 6, updates and announcements. Well, first, I just felt obligated to say something about septic tanks because I'm just used to discussing those at every meeting. I don't really have anything. I think all of you know that the county commission did adopt what we recommended, which is the additional language when brokerage contracts are signed. There was an issue briefly where the realtors had objected to this after we passed it, but it turned out that's because they didn't really understand what we had done, and once we explained it, they were fine with it. So I just said that because I'm like an addict trying to break myself off of discussing septic tanks. Dr. Gerardo, do you have any announcements, ma'am?
It's not a major announcement, but to provide just a quick informational update that there has been some interest expressed in trying to help support reconstitution of the Surface Water Coordination Committee. We have spoken with Mr. Kevin Hart, who has played a lead role, as have a number of individuals in the county with that meeting group activity. Susan Bodman from the county has agreed to aid with initial chairing to help bring that group back together. This is prompted in a bit by the April 12th event and some questions just about coordination and water management activities and, ways to better, work together to support, on the ground response and decision making. when, events like this are happening outside of like the hurricane season where there's a very different type of activation taking place. So we're going to assist with that, and then that's a subcommittee to the Technical Advisory Committee that has not, I think, been meeting for several years since pre-COVID, and Kevin's been very helpful with that. So the TAC can certainly expect to hear some more of that, as well as some of the public works folks who've historically been engaging. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hurtado. Let me ask you one question under updates. Are there any updates on my ARCs and houseboats issue?
I do have a couple of slides in the resilience presentation, so we can cover it in that.
And finally, today we have 2 action items that we will need to vote on. As all of you are aware, we are different from almost every other advisory board in Broward County in that although we are an advisory board, when we pass something, it goes to the county commission. With most advisory boards, that's not mandatorily the case, but it is with us. So we need to make sure that we get through these in a timely fashion. At this point in time, I'd like to recognize, Dr. Hurtado again, for the continuation of the future conditions groundwater elevation map update. I will comment that I had been contacted by a number of developers previously, and there was, I think, one developer rep or city rep or... Well, there had been at the last meeting,
Thank you.
but, I have not received any comment from any since. I already discussed it with Dr. Hurtado. If I had, I was directing them all to Dr. Hurtado, not me. But my understanding is you have not received any input, and I have not received any input, and I was ready to approve it anyhow.
Okay.
So please continue your presentation unless you have any opening remarks.
Yeah, I would only note that, yes, there was a law firm that was here in representation of, I think, one of the developers at the last meeting. I think they chose not to make comment ultimately. I had also shared that the city of Fort Lauderdale had expressed some inquiries. We had subsequently had a conversation with senior administration at the city of Fort Lauderdale, and I believe that the questions that were raised at that time were clarified, received no additional comment outside of those 2 items. So I really don't have anything of a great material update, but I might interject a few comments just on a slide or 2. Just a reminder, we're talking about, kind of the whole suite of ways in which we need to plan for resilience in our community, crossing diversity of infrastructure, and all these issues detailed here are all interrelated. We've talked about the importance of addressing drainage and surface water management systems, resilience with the update of the groundwater table map. We know that as a community, we're going through this stepwise process of continuously needing to reassess the data, our projections, and bring those updated projections into our infrastructure planning and requirements. So we have a future conditions groundwater table map that has been in place supporting these very types of projects since 2017. The update would integrate the change in the groundwater table that comes with the modified sea level rise modeling and its impact on the groundwater table with 3.3 feet through the year 2070, and I actually think that we'll be able to keep this map in place beyond that time frame. So I guess what I want to express is I do not anticipate that we would have this conversation again in 5 years, probably not, maybe not in 10 years. So I think that we would feel confident that this is going to be a good update that supports us for some time. I do want to share that, again, this is in response to the update to the sea level rise projection. I've had extensive conversations in the last month regarding the target that we use as the NOAA Intermediate High, and that has involved leaders in the publication of a variety of technical papers that serve as some of the leading references, and I believe that it has been reinforced that this is a very appropriate target for the types of investments that we do not get to revisit. there is a distinction between projects where you can go back and amend and provide for additional adaptation post-construction. But when you're talking about site development and by and large issues of, do you need additional fill? Well, if you don't put it in a place of the time of development, you don't get to go back in and revisit that. If you don't set aside the appropriate space on a site to deal with the infrastructure needs, it may be that not all of that infrastructure has to be built today, but in the planning process, there need to be the provisions for being able to meet those requirements as part of the licensing that it's accounted for. If we don't do that, we'll find that we have infrastructure that is immovable and constraints on the site that preclude our ability to meet the drainage needs. And that's why we feel very confident in continuing with the updates as has been part of our process and validation of this particular target in our planning.
Dr.
Yes, sir.
Corrado, because this could have an effect on development, I'd like to ask you a few questions to get the record straight. Are all of the recommendations that you are making here based on competent, substantial scientific evidence?
Yeah, absolutely. The sea level rise projection is not a staff-driven projection. You know, that has come from a body of experts that are convened to support the region in developing a recommendation. So that is a robust process, and we jointly across the region use that same projection. In terms of the modeling, we've worked with the United States Geological Survey in this work for decades. They were the body that supported us with the first a map, and they're the body that conducted the modeling in this subsequent update. And I think the integrity of the work is quite solid. It's peer-reviewed, it's published, and it's the same process that we've used historically.
By the way, for the record, note that's yes. And additionally, it's my understanding that in all or most cases, this is not stopping development. It's not, it may require building at higher elevations. It may require adding more fill. It may require items like that, but we are not taking away any vested property rights because we're simply requiring an accommodation to the facts on the ground, or maybe I should say the facts in the water.
That's absolutely correct. We have never had a project that couldn't, a site that simply couldn't be developed, couldn't be built, but clearly when we look at issues of land use, this type of information comes into play, and still in that process with all but one project, those projects have moved forward, and the one project that did not was because it was rescinded, not because there was a determination that the development opportunity was completely precluded.
Okay, because just in closing this, some people who have complained, I think, have adopted a ostrich head in the sand approach. You can't ignore the facts. The water table is rising, and all we're doing under this adopted map is recognizing that the water table is rising. We're not passing policy. We have, as Dr. Rado has said, this is we are passing policy, but it is a scientific base where we are simply acknowledging the new higher water table based on the best competent, substantial scientific record in the testimony in the record, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. All right, as a lawyer, I wanted to get all of that in the record so that in case there's any challenges. First, I saw you.
Thank you, Senator. I'd just like to make a comment. I think this is just another example of the expertise and the proactive initiatives by Broward County, the Office of Resiliency, when it comes to addressing future impacts from climate change. I'd just like to recognize the staff. We all know them, Dr. Arado, Dr. Mount, Dr. Shoshodi. These are really high-level experts, and the county's really well-served to have them working on this. And at the appropriate time, I'd be willing to make a motion to adopt.
Thank you. I'll take that motion, but first, let me call on Councilmember Starkey, and then I saw a hand up there. Okay, yes, Commissioner
So, I guess,
Biederman.
thank you. Two things, but I do totally agree with you, Mr. Hart, because without a doubt, staff has done a phenomenal job at articulating what our needs will be in the future based on scientific study, and I'm supportive of that. My interest and concerns then rise with the development. Once development comes in and they're building to the higher elevation, we have this continually in my town where, there are concerns with surrounding land uses that have not changed their elevation and will not because they're already built out. We try to explain oftentimes to the surrounding community that each development must retain its own water, even at the higher elevation. And should there be a problem after development, then that's on the responsibility of that developer. So somehow we need to make sure when we're going forward on this that, communication is everything. We need to make sure that there's something in there that recognizes that some developments that have been existing and may not be redeveloped anytime soon would be protected. And there's a process in place if there is larger, any kind of spillover development of the water. The other part is insurance. It's a huge issue. So with adopting this policy, will these newer developments be able to take advantage of some of the insurance benefits that may be,
We're talking about flood insurance.
flood
only.
insurance, absolutely.
Right. So, so on the first point, yes, the requirements are for entities to meet their water management needs on site. I think we're well aware that there are areas in the community that have been able to gain advantage by sometimes spillover of water from their own properties onto adjacent properties. Might have been part of a historic process, and sometimes when the new property is redeveloped and that spillover no longer occurs, it has the appearance that the redeveloped property has contributed to the water management challenges, but in fact it may be that there was just some taking advantage of excess area beyond the boundaries of the initial properties. But clearly you are correct that the development of one property can't impact the drainage. They have to manage.
Trespass of water.
They have to manage all of their water management needs on site. Second, with regards to flood insurance, any of the future conditions planning for flood elevations is a creditable activity under the community rating system. So communities that participate in the community rating system would be able to point to these activities as credits. Now, is the community in the position where 10, 15, 20 credits is going to change their rating? Maybe, maybe not. It has to be the whole of activities, and then but they do count, so yes. And secondly, when we meet these additional drainage needs as we move forward and flood maps are updated and there continue to be revisions to the flood maps, we continue to be better positioned in managing flood waters such that we are working to ensure flood elevations are reduced and building elevations are raised, and those two things together are intended to work to insulate our community from flood risk and escalating insurance costs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before the record show, Councilwoman Mateer is here. Commissioner Biederman, followed by Commissioner Caggiano. Or are you Vice Mayor or?
Mayor,
Mayor, I'm sorry.
still.
Sorry. Okay. Commissioner Biederman,
I s-
followed by Mayor Caggiano.
I support this for all the reasons that we've already been explained, but just to elaborate a little bit on the importance and the necessity. In Hollywood's budget this year, we've included a position similar to Dr. Gerardo. So if anybody knows anybody that's looking for a job and they want to apply, I'm sure it's going to be available online soon.
However, there's only one Dr. Gerardo, and we got her, and you can't
Well,
have
and,
her.
You
and there's
can't have
no borrowing from staff.
No, I get it. But you know, I'm sure our position's a little bit modeled on a lower scale than what the county has. But we owe you one because you just stole one of ours.
Oh.
And thank you, Mayor Caggiano.
I just want to say I agree with everybody, this has to be done. We're far past the time where build at your own risk, live there at your own risk. We have to do this for the communities all around us and for the insurance costs. Because if not, we have to get into the ARC building business. I mean, this has to be done.
We're going to need to be in the ARC business anyhow because we can't drain, but that's another topic. Commissioner Good.
What's an art? Yachting's better.
But in Davie, you need to take your animals with you, is why it's an ARC. Commissioner Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I just want to say that, we did spend quite a bit of time at our last meeting. As a matter of fact, we spent the entire meeting speaking on this item, and I was prepared to vote then. But I do find it was very gracious of you, Senator, to defer that vote until today in order to give other people an opportunity to weigh in. So when we're ready, I'd be happy to second the motion made by Mr. Hart.
Thank
sir.
you. Seeing no other, okay, I'm sorry, Member Bell.
Yeah, it's just an observation.
No.
I've lived here.
Okay, yes.
I've lived here almost my entire life in Fort Lauderdale. I grew up over Las Olas. I recall as a small kid watching the water come up every high tide in October. Used to wait for the school bus on Las Olas Boulevard, and lo and behold, every October, Las Olas went underwater. It still goes underwater every October. I used to fish on the seawalls, and the seawalls were fine every October. They went underwater. They still go underwater. I don't see, it looks like 10 to 17 inches of sea level rise since 1950. This is after 1950, but I don't see that much sea level rise coming up. The only time I've seen it really bad was when there was a pretty major storm offshore, and there was quite a bit of water. I've got some photographs I keep threatening to give to Jennifer showing Las Olas under more, I guess, deeper water than I think I've ever seen before. But, it does happen. Is there going, and I guess the question I've got, is there going to come a time when people are going to be told, well, you just can't drive the roads? And it is only on maybe the most 10 times a year right now with the October high tides. The rest of the year, it doesn't seem to really impact that
I don't
much.
think we're going to pass any ordinance saying you can't drive on the roads. But the facts on the ground or the facts of the water are the facts of the water, and there may be times, particularly until we can get the restudy completed and all of the repairs, where if you are driving in a normal car and you may not be able to get through. Please remember, I've said this before, our climate here is either, depending on what part of Broward you are, our climate is either tropical rainforest or tropical monsoon. And if you can't drain because our drainage is all through the canals and they're gravity based and they work fine when inland water is here and ocean water is here. At the point in time that they're at the same or ocean is higher and we're unable to drain until they put in the new water control barriers, salinity control barriers, the giant pumps, increasing the levels of the banks or doing something to increase the capacity, some of the roads will be unpassable at times.
And, I'm not denying that the water's coming up. And also, obviously, we're having increases in the water table. As another note, my associate was in St. Augustine the other day, and she was trying to get to a couple places and could not get to them because the roads were underwater. For the high tide.
That will happen, unfortunately. In the interest of speed, I'm going to ask for permission to limit it to the three cards that I see up, which are Councilmember Mattier, Commissioner Starkey, and Mayor Caggiano. So does anybody object if I limit it to these three? Good. Okay, council member, or is it council member or commissioner? Commissioner Mattier, you recognize, ma'am.
Thank you, and it's Mateo Bowen.
I'm sorry.
So my question is, one, can we repeat the motion on the floor? I'm sorry, I apologize, it was late today.
No problem. The
Can you hear
motion
me?
on the floor is to adopt the report of the future conditions groundwater elevation map and recommend the update to plate WM2.1 future conditions to the Broward County Commission for adoption.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. My follow-up is, within this map, do we also identify areas of vulnerability, communities of vulnerability, folks that will be more impacted than other individuals throughout the county?
Yeah, if you look on the map, it shows in different colors. I think it's on page 3, the upper right. It shows, and then you've got the modeling on page 4.
Yeah.
If you have
Thank you.
if you have any more specific questions, I'll lateral to Dr. Gerardo.
No, that's all for me. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. And I apologize, Commissioner. Your name tag said Nancy Mateo or not.
Yes,
So if there may be something written there, but I
Yeah, I
have
wrote
old
it.
eyes and I can't
That's
see.
the joy of getting married. You change your last name, so
As we say in Latin, Mazel Tov.
thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Starkey, followed by Mayor Caggiano.
Yeah,
Okay, he's taken down. Gotcha, okay. Councilmember Starkey.
Thank you. Just to quickly follow up on what Board Member Bell was talking about, and that's our roads. I mean, clearly, once we adopt this and the county adopts this, we really need to start looking at the elevation of the roads and not just individual properties. The county has a number of county roads, the state has a number of state, we have local roads. Staying in our own lanes, we should also look at improving those road elevations, specifically if we ever had to evacuate.
Was staying in our own lanes an intentional pun?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, did you like that?
I did.
I'm glad you caught that.
I
I don't
did.
know that anybody else did. I worked it in. So my thing is, I travel down to the Keys all the time, and during their road project, and which was massive in order to raise the elevation of US 1 south, they only went 6 inches. Well, 6 inches is now flooding again. So I always knew back then, this is ridiculous. Why did they go 6 when they should have gone 12 or even above? I mean, you're talking about massive road projects that need to be elevated to a higher elevation. And I think if we can get that addressed sometime, if it's not here, in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to respond to
of
that
course.
and provide just a couple of other comments. One, I want folks to know that there are a couple of changes to the presentations that aren't in front of you, and we'll make sure that you have the updated presentation circulated electronically after the meeting. But the most significant thing regarding the change in materials that you have before you, Senator Geller, we had talked about an implementation date of June 2024 as opposed to December. So I want you to make note that in the slides that June reference is referenced here. And in response,
And by the way, the reason that we did that is to avoid any lawsuits, because there are plan developers that will have plans in place that they may not have filed yet, but that they're about to. So we gave them another 6 months to submit their plans, and that should be, in my professional legal opinion, is that should deal with any of their issues. Let me have Dr. Otto finish, then I'm calling Commissioner Good, and then you. Remember, we said we're only taking 3 more, so since Mayor Caggiano was stopped, I'm replacing him with Commissioner Good, and these are the last comments. Dr. Gerardo?
so with regards to the roadway projects, that really requires collective oversight and insistence. So this map itself is not going to set a road elevation. It'll address the drainage associated with the road elevation. And it's the responsibilities of our communities to ensure that when state projects and local projects are taking place, that there's an awareness of the needs to plan for these future conditions that Broward County has established. So we may find moving forward that the state may have reference to lower elevations. and, lower projections, potentially lower implications for drainage. And if we're planning for a higher standard than the state, we want to see compatibility in that infrastructure. So it's really important to advocate early in the projects about the conditions that are being used in the planning. I'll share that Hillsborough Beach, and they shared this as well at the Resilience Roundtable on October 6th, that they had a project as well that was addressing high tide flooding or needing amendment because of high tide flooding. And the DOT was very adamant about a 6-inch adjustment. And I think ultimately the project, it was elevated 12 or 18 inches because we came back and pushed hard about the need to ensure that this was a project that wouldn't have to be revisited in 2, 3, or 4 years. And so it requires collective oversight. It requires additional work at the level of the League of Cities to advocate for the right projects. And I just want to say, so it's not all self-implementing, and there's a real need for vigilance and coordination, particularly on roadway projects.
We're going to need to take a vote very quickly. These are the last two speakers. I want everybody understanding that. Commissioner Good.
Thank you, Senator. I can say that Mr. Otto took away a bit of what I was going to make reference to, because that's to follow up on Commissioner Starkey. But in regards to notifying or coordinating with some of these other agencies, and particularly I'm sitting here thinking about the MPO and how can we get this on their plate. And I don't know if there's a possibility that there may be a future joint meeting where we can just have some dialogue about this kind of issue here, because it's really important to get those folks on our side, because they're the ones who support the long-range planning funds. And I think that's what we really need to do. So thank you for your comment, and thank you, Commissioner Starkey, for bringing
And
that
that
up.
may be something that we just asked Dr. Gerardo can speak with Greg Stewart, although I know you know him, to get on their agenda. Last comment.
Just very
Councilmember
quickly,
Starkey.
what we do in Davie, I know you're talking about filing a deadline. We talk about also allowing them a letter of intent. They may not have their plans all ready for filing, but at least if they file a letter of intent for development, that's usually sufficient for us in some projects when we have maybe a zoning in progress or an ordinance change. So I don't know if you all do that, but that might be something to satisfy the developing community and let them know that we're not kind of cutting them off at the knees, but we're actually giving them opportunities to go forward with some planning.
Well, again, that's why we postponed the effective date, so they have another 5 months or 6 months, actually till June, to comply.
But what benefit does that have if we're giving them 5 months to build something that is unsuitable or unsustainable?
It avoids lawsuits, but I really have to vote now because I've been saying this. We're kind of getting short on time. Member Hart moved, seconded by Commissioner Good, the following language: recommend the update to plate WM 2.1 future conditions to the Broward County Board of County Commissioners. This has been extensively debated. Is there any additional debate? Seeing no debate, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition?
Senator Taylor, if we
yes.
could pause for a few seconds while we record things online?
Yes.
We have a slight delay.
Okay. Well, I'm also continuing to ask, is there any opposition in person or online? Is there any opposition? Is there any opposition? Greg, have we updated online? Okay.
We're just about there.
Okay. Well, unless you tell me otherwise, please show this adopted unanimously.
Yes, sir.
At this point in time, as soon as you have caught up on that, you have to hurry up to the speaker's podium to present on our Integrated Water Resources Plan grant, and we will need a vote on this as well. So again, we have 2 action items here, then a third, which we will not be voting on. Dr. Mount, you're recognized.
Good morning, and thank you, sir. Thank you to the WAB. Previous to this meeting, the TAC has advanced this for your consideration. So we have already had a TAC vote, and now it's in front of you. As many of you know, and have been here almost since the beginning of the IWRP, if not from the beginning, the Integrated Water Resources Plan is a 10-year plan. We update it every 5. We're almost due for another update. Oops. And it is used to coordinate local water management efforts to meet present and future urban water supply needs. And we focus on governance and coordination, which is here at the WAB. We also focus on water conservation, water management, and water resource assessment. And in order to do that, we support efforts at the municipal level and at other locations by awarding grants. And this is a 50% cost share, up to a 50% cost share. And you can see how effective we have been. So to date, we've contributed to about $2.9 million worth of projects across Broward County to advance the IWRP. And this is substantial. And these projects go from anywhere from installing reclaimed water lines to innovative projects like swell reclamation and things like that. So the grant types.
What is CSID?
It's the Coral Springs Improvement District.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We offer two different types of grants, and this is funded through Broward County and then sent to the participating municipality or agency through an interlocal agreement. The first one that we support are feasibility analysis and design, and this is funded to a maximum of $125,000 from the county. The second grant that we award is reclaimed water construction, again with 50% cost share, up to a $200,000 maximum. And we do realize that the reclaimed water construction projects are significantly more expensive than a feasibility analysis design project, and we try to make up that cost a little bit. But oftentimes these are projects in the millions of dollars. For the 2023 grant cycle, we have received 5 applications. There was 1 for feasibility analysis and design and 4 for construction. And what's nice to see here is the increase in construction grants or construction applications due to previous feasibility analysis and design awarded grants. So they're taking that initial seed money and moving forward and moving to construction, which is great to see. I'm going to talk about each of those projects just briefly. City of Coconut Creek. This is for a reclaimed water line serving Main Street and adjacent properties. This will be a 6-phase project, and it proposes almost 15,000 linear feet of reclaimed water line. So this entire development will make use of reclaimed water rather than impacting our fresh potable sources or groundwater. The second is in the city of Pompano Beach, and this is a reclaimed water line expansion in Lighthouse Point. And again, it'll expand our reuse into these areas, and residents are required by Lighthouse Point ordinance to connect to the reuse system. City of Oakland Park. This is a unique one, and this is an interesting project to bring to the WAB, and it was interesting through the TAC as well, and just my personal interest. Here, City of Oakland Park will be installing a subsurface detention tank of almost 300,000 gallons. So during the wet season when we're taking water in, it'll be stored and used for a dry day. So making use of those rainy days in a recreation area. This will be put under a performance platform or amphitheater, if you want to call it that. And so it'll remain under there. Things will happen on top of it, and it'll blend seamlessly into the environment. So this is a really creative use for this material. And then City of Sunrise. At the Sawgrass Utility Complex administration site, there'll be an irrigation project, and this will convert all current potable water irrigation systems to use reclaimed. And last and certainly not least, we have Broward County Water and Wastewater Services, and this is to provide funding for a South Regional Wellfield Supply Well Location Study. This study will identify up to 5 ideal water supply well locations to best account for future conditions. So as part of this, staff evaluates the IWRP grants by a set of criteria that are sent out to everybody that's proposing. So we have a kickoff, we provide how we do this, how we're going to evaluate you, and then we receive the applications. We award points. And through a process, there's 4 or 5 people that go in, score, and then coordinate and discuss. And we pick the projects with the highest points that would have the greatest return on investment. Same thing for water construction. The points are almost the same, but due to the differences in the actual projects, there's slight variations. So just to present all submissions in front of the WAB, what we have today. We have those 5 submissions, 4 construction, 1 feasibility analysis and design, and the original request of $200,000 each for construction and $125,000 for the feasibility analysis and design. Staff recommended to the TAC and was accepted by the TAC to fund the Broward County Water and Wastewater Services Project at the 50% cost share, which was $92,692. That's why you see the number vary a little bit there. That is the 50% of the cost that we have available. And then we make 4 recommendations for construction. We recommend $175,000 for Coconut Creek, Pompano Beach, and Oakland Park. And then we recommend $120,000 for Sunrise. You'll note that all the projects that were submitted are recommended for funding. However, here at this level, we have decreased the amount of funding in order to reach all those projects and contribute. So we have secured the TAC recommendation. We're asking for the WAB recommendation today. And then if you look at the timeline here, we hope to have these projects start in April 2024. So we hope to be able to kick off the spring season of 2024 with some really great projects and things moving forward. So with that, sir, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So all of these have already been recommended by the TAC.
Yes, sir.
And is there, I note that we have reduced marginally the amounts that they requested, in most cases from 200 to 175. Is that based on the 50%, or is it based on the amount of money we have available?
Sir, it was based on the amount of money available, and certain. We did also look at the total amount awarded to all the municipalities in the past, and set it that way.
I've noticed that they seem to be geographically spread over most of Broward County, from northeast to the south, which I think is good. I agree with you. That idea in Oakland Park is innovative, and
Mr. Carbon is here. That is his project.
that's very innovative and very good. Are there any questions or comments? I see Commissioner Starkey followed by Councilmember Starkey followed by Commissioner Good.
Just quickly, I do support it, and I would make the motion to accept the recommendations.
Okay, I'll take a second now, and then we'll continue debate. Seconded by Commissioner Good, and then Commissioner Good followed by Mayor Caggiano.
Thank you, Senator. I just had a quick question in regards to the evaluation. I mean, not so much for this time, but in your future. But do you all consider where the 50% matching fund, where the source of funding is? I mean, like if it's a state appropriation or something like that, does that make a difference?
We do not.
Okay.
We don't consider the source funds.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Caggiano, you're recognized, sir.
My question on the design of this, the underwater holding tank, is there something going to be, I'm thinking about as water comes under and lifts, is this going to be a tank, is something going to be built on top of it? Is it going to be sandwiched? Is it going to be like, in Brooklyn, you have the train station, then you have the stadium on top of it. Is there a point in time when there's enough pressure coming underneath, pushing up the tanks, that there's going to be a problem with the building that's on top of it? You know what I'm talking about, like squeezing a sandwich?
I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm confident the answer is no. But Dr. Mount,
I would defer to Mr. Carbon. He's the
Carbon.
engineer.
Okay.
But thank you, Water Advisory Board, Albert Carbon, Public Works Director for City of Oakland Park. It's a solid structure, Mayor. And then if it goes over the 300,000 gallons, it will overflow back into the stormwater system. So it's got a maximum capacity overflow into that. So again, during the dry season, we'll use it till the 3,000. During the wet season, if we have several days that are dry, we'll start using it then. So it'll fluctuate.
It's a cistern,
Thank
but
you.
underwater. Right, okay. Any additional questions or comments or debate? If not, I'm sorry, who moved that again? Councilmember Starkey moved, seconded by Commissioner Good, to recommend the Integrated Water Resource Plan grants to the Broward County Commission. Debate having concluded, all of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Last call for opposed. Show it adopted unanimously. Okay. I would now like to call back Dr. Hirado for our resilience update. And I will, this meeting will end no later than noon promptly. Okay.
Okay.
I have a 12 o'clock appointment, but I have to walk all the way down the hall. Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Hirado, you recognize me.
Thank you. And Senator Geller has shared this presentation will probably run in delivery longer than the 20 minutes. I've added slides since this was a presentation that was deferred from the last meeting, and there have been some updates. So once again, you'll receive the updated slides following the meeting. And hopefully there will be some opportunity for conversation, and I'm anticipating there might be. So this is a somewhat comprehensive overview with regards to resilience initiatives in Broward County with emphasis on the countywide resilience plan. I'll be talking about that, brief updates on the CNSF study, Resilient Florida funding grants, other resilient grant activities, and then I'll just remind everyone of the Compact Summit that is to be held in 2 weeks. So, with regard to the countywide resilience plan, you will likely remember that this was a recommendation that emerged through the annual resilience roundtables, a recognition that while we've been very successful with design standards for infrastructure, we still have this whole of landscape where we have existing infrastructure and no immediate plans for redevelopment, and what do forthcoming flood conditions require in the way of additional coordination of infrastructure improvements and potential revisioning of how we think about redevelopment in order to address these evolving conditions. And so we contracted with Hazen and Sawyer being the prime, and there's a diversity of firms supporting that work. And we are about, I want to say, maybe 16, 18 months into this project. There will be significant work taking place between now and the April-May timeframe, and June and July when we hope to, really finalize things. So, primary elements: community engagement. Again, this is a county-wide plan. It's not a neighborhood-level activity. So the community engagement has largely been with you all, with your staff, and with community-based organizations and others that serve as voices and have familiarity for some of the more local issues. But we've had to be, a little more realistic about how on the ground we can be, because we can't be in every neighborhood community. Although we have shared, these presentations at HOA meetings where these requests have been made. The plan involves a countywide risk assessment relative to future conditions flood risk. So this has involved extensive modeling, which I believe we've shared with you at a high level. It involves economic modeling under the no action scenario and economic modeling under the adaptation alternative scenarios. And that's what's going to allow us to be able to talk about ROI, or the return on investment, with coordinated, phased, implemented strategies associated with an adaptation plan that would be the end product, a recommended adaptation plan with water management alternatives on these subbasins, and an online platform that serves to share the elements of the plan and track plan implementation. So all of this is mainly underway. I wouldn't say that anything is like final in any form. We've tried to share and keep folks reminded and up to date on high-level progress through the website, which is needing some additional updates, but there we do have Resilience in the Making, which provides updates on a bi-monthly basis based upon our meetings with the steering committee. We have a steering committee that is meeting every 2 months and overseeing the progress. Those meetings are webcast, they're sunshine meetings, so certainly others can be sitting in and some do. And as we move forward with additional content, the presentations are shared here. So I do want to invite you to look at broward.org/resilience plan, because the presentations, and one in particular that I'll be referencing today on the economic modeling, is posted there, and I think you'd like to see the details in a manner that I won't be able to cover today. Again, the additional details and ways to provide additional input and meeting information is posted on the site. So the community outreach progress, as I've shared it, it's really one engaging at different levels. When we were working to update the model, a lot of technical engagement from your teams. We have reached out with regards to the model results and sharing how do these model results compare with what you know to be on the ground. What are some of your, this is mainly cities, water management entities, where do you have projects underway? What needs do you have? What would you identify as a priority as moving forward? And we're also in the midst of this process right now with public engagement strategy, which I'll talk about in a moment. As we move forward with these adaptation phase 1 results, which will be our first cut at adaptation prior to getting additional feedback, we will have that. We're going to be holding regional sub-meetings for additional engagement before trying to finalize the plan elements. Again, this is all at a scale of 50-acre sub-basins, so it's kind of high-level organization of adaptation needs, but nonetheless, this is the process we'll be moving forward in the next several months. After the plan is completed, there will be a next stage of really advertising more about the plan and what it can do for our community based upon the ROI and the performance of the proposals, and then we'll be looking to implement the plan. So the anticipation being that we could spend 6 months to a year in working to promote and organize the funding finance strategies, and then in the next year ideally we'd be moving forward with recommendations through an agreed upon mechanism, which is obviously the elected officials forum. So some of the listening sessions right now, we have sought to take advantage of communities and individuals who are very close to the ground. So for example, the Urban League is very connected with a community where they have development initiatives that are underway. So we've coordinated with the executive director, Dr. Jermaine Smith-Bow. We have a community meeting that's an in-person meeting scheduled for December 20th. The Community Foundation of Broward was very on the ground with the April 12th flood event. I mean, they were one of the entities that was delivering relief where there weren't a lot of resources. So we had a meeting with their senior administration earlier this week and gain more from their perspective about needs and exposures. We have a student listening session scheduled with the Eco Explorers, who are part of a Museum of Discovery and Science effort. We felt it important to have that youth perspective. They're going to be carrying through with implementation well beyond our careers. And we've also reached out to Hispanic Unity, which is represented on the steering committee through their most recent executive director, but we had reached out at the onset and spoken with the current leadership about the resilience plan. We'll be inviting them, some of the community members that are being served by Hispanic Unity, the Seminole tribe, and then we're also in the midst of a meeting involving senior representatives from HOAs and environmental groups as another kind of forum. Again, what do their HOAs talk about? What do they know about their communities that they would want us to know? And this isn't only about flood, but it's also about heat.
I'm sorry, Dr. Arado, did you say where is that? I don't see that on the list.
It's not scheduled yet. They're still in the coordination, so I don't have it on here, and I didn't have a pretty icon, but we're still working on that element. And so
that was one of my notes.
Yes,
to ask you
thank you.
to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So that's the community outreach component and the engagement that's been taking place. The next is, well, what is the plan evaluating? Well, with regards to flooding, and I don't recall if you've seen this slide before, but certainly it's been in the backup that I haven't had a chance to present for some time. So it is building upon all of the work that you all have seen and overseen over the past 5 and 7 years. It is taking the future conditions groundwater table, supersaturation of the groundwater, rainfall, storms, 100-year rainfall events, 50-year rainfall events, storm surge events, looking at the intensification of these rain events, and delivering that in a compound manner, not these events individually, but holistically. So you might remember that FEMA doesn't evaluate sea level rise, and we haven't evaluated sea level rise with storm surge. This is the opportunity that we bring all of that together with intensification, with groundwater table rise. What does the condition look like? And a viewer is available online, and here's the mini link. Your teams, this has been well shared with your staff, the public works folks, the water managers, the utility folks. The TAC has been engaged. We've reached out and spoken with the Broward County City Managers Association. It's been shared at the Resilience Roundtable. So this viewer was developed so that the communities could look at the model output, they could select the various scenarios that they were interested in and compare flood conditions across conditions.
Hey, Dr. Rutter,
Yes.
since none of us can actually read this, can you tell us what the different charts actually show?
Oh, yes, and what's in these windows is not meaningful, really, except that I think that the first window may be the current condition, and it doesn't matter too much, except there's a couple of things. The point being, though, when one gets into the window, you can select your own panels. So you can look at the conditions across your panels, you can click on a site, you can zoom in, and then you can evaluate flood risk today and flood risk with a 10-year storm and flood risk with sea level rise in a 10-year storm, flood risk with 2 feet, 3 feet. You can choose all the panels that you want. But the most important thing here at a high level would be, I think that the one on the top left was current condition. The one on the top right is 2 feet of sea level rise with a 100-year rainfall event. The one on the bottom left is 2 feet of sea level rise, 3 feet of sea level rise with the 100-year event. And the one on the bottom right is worst case scenario. 3 feet of sea level rise, 100-year storm, 100-year storm surge, at supersaturated king tides. Worst case of all conditions. Now, it's not to say that we organize all of our infrastructure around the worst case condition, but what was really compelling about the model results was this data was shared in this room on April 12th at 1 p.m. And then we made our way home in 3 and 4 and 5 feet of floodwaters. I was on my way to the airport, same exact day that this data was shared.
Are you implying that you caused that flooding?
I think it was the result of the modeling that drove the condition, yes.
That's what I thought.
So, but what was interesting and what is interesting is the bottom right aligns very well with the flood conditions that were observed on April 12th with a 1 in 1,000-year storm. So it gives you context. This is a major condition, and those water levels, 5 feet at the airport, 2 and 3 feet in many of the impacted neighborhoods, that's precisely what was shown in the modeling. So we went through an exercise of comparison, and when we went through the exercise with all the water managers relative to other storms, they all said, yes, the model, these windows are capturing well what they know to be the conditions and the vulnerabilities on the ground. So that's why this was prepared, was to say, how well is the initial model working, and now we can use this in the adaptation performance.
Dr. Rutter, one last thing. I've
Yes.
already advised Mr. Mount that we're not going to get his presentation today, so you have a little more time.
Yeah, I was kind of concerned that might be the case. Thank you. But since this one was deferred for 2 meetings,
Yeah.
now Greg's will be deferred
and
for
it got
3.
a little longer each time.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, but hopefully it's time well spent. So we, in sharing this work, we then held 5 regional workshops. So these were with all the various communities. And we looked at the Northwest and then the Northeast and Central and Southwest, Southeast. Had the meetings, attendees, went through the model results, invited them to zoom in, evaluate any feedback that they would want to provide, have us look at questions they had about the model results. And again, are this generally consistent with what you know about your community? And are there any areas of particular interest and need in your community that you would like us to explore as adaptation priorities in this work? So those questions were asked, raised, and the Hazen team managed that process for us. So then I zoom in here and just and provide a little bit more detail of how you could use the panels. So again, you can zoom in physically by clicking. You could put in an address, and you can look at any site within your jurisdiction. You can put in your home address, and it will cause all of the panels to concurrently zoom in on the panels or the conditions that you've already set that you want to look at. So here we're looking at 115 South Andrews Avenue under these conditions, and you can see how severe flooding could evolve under a combination of scenarios. And of course, we do know that flooding on Broward Boulevard was beyond belief. So when one says, well, these look too severe to be real, under the right conditions, these are conditions that can materialize. And I think we heard some very interesting stories of folks trudging through, chest-high water in the Broward Boulevard area to try and get home. Okay, so specific observations through this outreach process and the number of cities saying, yes, this is exactly what we know about our communities. Some noted that they had some capital improvement plans that they wanted to make sure that we had as we moved forward. South Broward Drainage District said, you know what, there's also some areas of redevelopment. There's probably some higher elevations than what you're capturing in the model. And we acknowledge, yes, as areas do redevelop, they may have slightly lower elevations than what the model is predicting because they might have put in fill during that process. That's true. There were some notes that we might not have captured well enough the drawdown of the water table around the Prospect well field, and should make sure that that is accounted for, because it does suck water in and maybe draws down those flood elevations. And then, the city of Fort Lauderdale asked if flows were accounted for in terms of the city infrastructure and flows from west to east in the modeling. So would we be able to account for when there's discharges in canals, how that would affect water levels downstream? And the response was yes. So key takeaways. Again, strong alignment with model results with some of these stronger storms, like we saw with Tropical Storm Eta and the April 12-13 event. Strong degree of consistency between the model and observations, additionally, and confirmed acceptability of the baseline model to move forward to the next phase of adaptation planning. Okay. All right, so now how is the adaptation planning approach advancing? So the Hazen team took a first cut at saying, look, there are some geographic similarities in areas throughout the county that just because of the way they look today are going to lend more easily to certain approaches. And so they developed this sub-regional approach that you can see here. They're kind of numbered. We shared this also at the Broward Resilience Roundtable, and folks kind of nodded their head and said, yeah, it makes sense that you would take this approach with these sub-regions. And, basically it recognizes that there are certain areas of the county where green infrastructure and water storage are going to be more feasible because there's more open space. And there are areas that are so densely developed that there's going to probably be a greater need for active stormwater management and pumping. And you can see the details here, but just so the idea here is that with this generalized approach, Hazen and Sawyer will take their technical and water, all of the engineers and modelers who are working on this project, and they'll take a look at the landscape and develop a first cut of adaptation strategies that kind of align with these approaches to see and test how far can those go and what level of performance is provided in this first assessment. And then they're going to come back and say, okay, based upon this general approach, this is how we commenced. Now we need to take it to the next level. How do we tweak it further? What additional investments would you like? Is there another pump? Is there some more green infrastructure? Additional storage opportunities, and they've been soliciting that information in the process to develop and guide the strategies that will be most fitting and accommodating in these geographic areas because of the nature of the landscape, or maybe the depth to groundwater table, all of those considerations that lend for one project approach versus another. Okay?
Wow.
Okay, so then the next phase of the assessment, and this has relevance to the cities because we've tried to undertake this in a way that not only does it work for county assets, but the municipalities could utilize this same approach. And basically, we went through a process of developing a weighting and ranking of certain resilience factors for our infrastructure. And so we brought together our teams, our public works, our construction management, facilities and operations, parks, transit, airport, port, to say when we look at these assets, what are the things, what ranks and weights heaviest in terms of the criticality of this piece of infrastructure when it's flooded? How sensitive is it to the flood impacts? Can it still function? Is it temporarily impacted? Does it completely disrupt services? Are there economic implications? Not to the county's revenues for that day, but community-wide, are there cascading economic implications that make this asset all the more exposed? What about the asset value? So we went through this process. There were mechanism involved. It was a really smart approach. Everyone who was participating here thought it was just really wise. And we ended up with the weighting of factors, as you can see here. The criticality of the asset weighted at 35%, economic considerations at 26%, severity of impacts at 21%, and asset value 14%. So then you take the asset, this criticality and ranking, you combine it with the flood score that will come through the vulnerability assessment relative to these exposures, and then that'll allow us to weight assets for priority investment. And the approach, as I say, it can be modified by the port or the airport or by a municipality, but generally, if the ranking and weighting are acceptable, they could transfer over, and then you would just plug in based upon a similar assessment of your own infrastructure, that vulnerability score, and you could use that in your own capital planning process. So the next area of evaluation is that of heat, and that was added to our solicitation, and the team is working on that. So we've done a lot of in-house heat assessments. This is another mapping of heat. And this is really critical because I think we've seen, this last year we had 36 days of temperatures over 105 degrees Fahrenheit in Broward County. And that's expected to rise to something like 85 degrees in 2050. We were off the charts in terms of number of hours of extreme heat. And the most extreme day prior to this extreme year, was 6 days of extreme heat. And we had, I think, again, 35, 37 this year. So extreme heat is going to challenge our communities. And as we're dealing with water management, we have an opportunity to combine green infrastructure to jointly address water management and heat. And so it's really important that we overlay heat and identify heat islands and vulnerable communities and really work to combine investments with all of those factors in mind.
And how did you define extreme heat?
Well, these are just hot spots by thermal trends, but what I just said was 105 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, and all of the red dots would be
Well, here-
urban concrete where they're, which
Where it's
attracts the heat,
compounded, it's
right?
even higher, correct. And so we'll see here, part of the Hazen assessment was to look at the differentiation between areas of green infrastructure versus this hot spot. How much of a distinction or an elevation in temperature can you find, or do you find in this disparity of community landscape, and how far can green infrastructure go to mitigating those impacts? And what they found in the analysis is actually, on average, about a 10-degree temperature differential is found between non-green areas, or just, like cement-based community, versus green areas. And in fact, I think nationally they find the number to be around 14, and there was actually a range here, I think, which was 10 to 14, but I've heard others really reference 14 degrees as that distinction. But if you use a buffer, or excuse me, if you put in green infrastructure, what their analysis showed is you could derive benefits of that green infrastructure as much as 1,000 feet in this buffer area from that placement. And of course, it depends on the size of the green infrastructure. It needs to be a sizable amount of greenery, but there's a buffer or an expansion of those thermal benefits to an area beyond that immediate location with green infrastructure.
If you can go back, the lower right again, too small for us to see. Can you just explain what that chart is? The 10% difference?
Yeah, this is a
What are
10%
you
per
showing here?
impervious area. Oh, this chart here?
Yeah. We
Oh,
can't-
it's just
too small.
examples of green infrastructure.
Okay,
It's
thank
just a diagram of pretty green infrastructure, but models of what green infrastructure can look like in our community.
Thank you. Again,
Yeah.
many of the things are just too small for us to
Yeah,
see.
I'm sorry about the details in this
Right.
in particular didn't matter, but it's a teaser for visual interest.
You're teasing us.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm moving into, and this is the addition to your slides. These were added today, so you'll receive this in the modified backup. This work was shared with the steering committee just last month, and there are many, many, many more slides than what we're sharing today. But this was the first cut on the economics of inaction.
And that's the steering committee on the resilience?
On the resilience
Right.
plan,
Right.
that's
Okay, thank you.
correct. And so the analysis, this work was conducted by McKinsey Global. I'll share that our chief financial officer is on
Excuse
this.
me 1 second. I see everybody's looking for those charts. As Dr. Hirado said, these have been added. They're not in the documents that you have in front of you. They will be sent out, so you can stop looking for them.
Yeah.
Please continue.
And the more complete slide deck of the whole of the evaluation is available online at broward.org/resilience plan. So I actually encourage that you'll go there and look at the whole of the presentation. So McKinsey Global did this work. I want to say that it aligns, at least this graphic here, it aligns with the Southeast Florida business case for resilience that we all saw in 2020, where the compact counties, the 4 counties contracted with state grant and so forth and business community, and AECOM did that work, and we found in Broward County, about a $5 billion annual exposure or potential losses associated with future conditions. And that's basically what we see here. 3.3 feet sea level rise 2070. Without mitigation, we could see about a $5 billion in annual losses. And then right now we have slightly less than $1 billion every year. So right now we have about 800 million is the average annual potential losses, and this could go to 5 billion for the 2-foot sea level rise scenario. If I can get my cursor on it, I don't, yeah. For
All of this is based just on sea level rise
it-
or other flooding. It's all water
It's the
related.
combination with the probabilities of each annually averaged.
But it's all water related
That's
only.
right.
This is
That's
not
correct.
including
Not-
heat or anything
And it's
else.
not including
Right.
wind.
Gotcha.
So it's
Okay,
all
right.
flood-based,
Thank you.
correct. Okay, so then these graphics on the right show the exposures today, where they're concentrated. The evaluation is based on census tracts under current conditions, and then relative to 3.3 feet of sea level rise. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't show all the elevation of seawalls. Okay, so it doesn't include all of the adaptation improvements that will either come because they're already part of ordinance, or those that would be part of a plan that we haven't yet put together. But this is unmitigated. You can see the concentration of exposures. We know that, South Broward's been very involved in the conversation about flood exposures out here because of the C9 canal and drainage limitations that occur when the Central South Florida Flood Control Project can't keep tidal waters at bay, but and those drainage dependencies. So you can see that there's lots of exposure out west, but there are very significant exposures in areas that are in particular east of the salinity control structures, where you have very strong tidal influence and susceptibility. Storm surges built into this also.
And that's also expecting that nothing will happen with the CNS.
That's correct.
Correct, okay.
Correct. Okay. So the analysis conducted by McKinsey also looked at implications for flood insurance policies. And so they look at pricing today under risk rating 2.0 and what's projected to occur with the cost of single family flood insurance policies as flood risk rises, and the affordability of those policies as the prices increase. And what they project is a 77% reduction in flood insurance policies because people won't be able to afford it, or choose, assuming there's not a mortgage involved, they would elect not to insure because of the cost and questions of affordability. And the estimation is that the uncovered damages could rise to $1.5 billion by 2050 and $3.4 billion by 2070. And there's also, based actually on the previous slide, an estimated loss in.
Dr. Harada, where are those numbers on the chart? I'm not seeing them.
Well,
1.5 or 3.4.
I'm giving you additional numbers.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That will be available in the other slides, but I wanted to share them because they're important bullets.
That's fine. I was just,
Yeah.
I was looking for them and
You're right, it
not
is
seeing
not
them.
in this
Okay,
slide,
thank
but
you.
it's a compilation of the information.
Thank you.
And that's by year?
That would be annual averaged exposures.
In 47 years, if we don't do anything and not accounting for any of the changes that we've already made. Okay.
So, but reductions in flood insurance could contribute to additional losses at a personal level, in addition to the overall economic consequences. And economic consequences, loss in production, could be equal to 0.7% of the value of the Broward economy, or 0.8 billion in current prices on top of the damages. So again, these are unmitigated, and the whole point is that it underscores the importance of the work and the need for a plan, and provides a baseline for how we measure the performance of the benefits of a plan that we will put forward, and we'll have the costs of the infrastructure relative to risk reduction and all of the other economic metrics, and that's why the information is shared for the no action scenario. And it was important, while we don't like to present exposure without solution, it was important to go through the exercise to say, is there anything else from an economic standpoint that we ought to be considering that should be brought into the calculus? So we had George Tablack, who's our chief financial officer, who was part of the steering committee, who was very impressed with the approach here. We also have a steering committee that's separate from that, a blue ribbon committee, where we have insurance and risk rating experts who are also looking at the initial results to provide additional guidance about things that ways that we might present or evaluate information to help improve our position. So again, I encourage you to go to the full presentation, but I also want to say this isn't the complete story. So this isn't the headline. The headline is the plan, but it's important to again, it's context. I think this might be the last slide on economics, but if you go into the table in the other presentation, you can look at the results by city. We also had this same information available for the most part in the business case for resilience. So we've broken this down by city before, but some good numbers, not positive numbers, but appropriate numbers to have in consideration are potential impacts to residential property value. And in this case, we're looking at a potential devaluation in personal residential property of 13% or $24 billion under the 2-foot sea level rise scenario, and a $39 billion or average 21% reduction in property values under the 3-foot sea level rise scenario. And of course, that's important to individuals and our whole tax base, and so additional numbers that we would want to mitigate. You can see the exposures in terms of areas most exposed, most impacted in these reductions in the graphics on the right. Again, underscoring the importance of adaptation investments that mitigate, as well as how we think about, where we want to put infrastructure longer term. I mean, we might be looking at adaptation and for some time, but at some time too, we might pause and think about one site versus another site for different types of development decisions based upon the performance of the adaptation plan and how much can be mitigated. And remember, some of this is storm surge, and storm surge exposure exists today too. But as it's compounded, it may be less tenable and it's harder to recover. And so these slides, the more complete presentation, also look at recovery times with events, and so you can see much more of the picture. And then,
Dr. Bruno, on that last chart,
yeah.
Same question I've asked earlier. Does that include the seawall ordinance that we've already
Does
passed?
not.
And does not include, that's assuming CNSF does nothing.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all of this is all in action.
Well,
Yeah, current condition.
Okay. At some point in time, I think I'm going to ask you to go back and redo these, accounting for ordinances that we have already passed, not any of the future. So for example, we can't take into account the CNSF, but
Right.
if we've already passed the seawall ordinance, I think we will need to assume that that will have some effect.
It'll be incorporated in the next round of modeling.
But it's not in this round.
That's correct,
Gotcha.
because it's not in place yet. But yes, it will be incorporated, and the assumed condition across the full county by 2070, because the ordinance requires that
Thank you.
at the 5 feet NAVD. Okay. So the next, and then this is the final graphic, reductions in revenues based upon the property or the ad valorem decrease. And then the graphic on the right is the distribution of annual property tax collected today versus tomorrow within action. So you could see the importance of certain areas today and how they would be diminished with time if those property values are impacted and basically go to zero. And that's the assumption.
Last one is residential only.
Yes.
This one is residential and commercial.
I think it's still residential.
Sorry.
I
Of
think,
course, it didn't say that on there.
yeah, and it may be, it's residential.
Okay.
Yes.
Can't read
You
little
can't see
tiny
that?
type. Okay.
It'll be
Thank
in the
you.
notes.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
that, we did retain the footnotes even if they're not viewable at this font. Okay. And this is the last slide. But, yeah, I might be. But this one, at least this is a combination of flood damage with vulnerable population based upon the SVI. What's SVI again? Social Vulnerability Index. So it takes into a whole suite of calculations, including, you know, income, age, ethnicity, I think is part of that. So in light blue are high-risk flood areas today, overlaid with vulnerable population. So we know that there are areas that are also, if we looked at heat, again, we find the same, you can look at that information as well. And then in the dark blue is with sea level rise, the expansion of those areas. So we need to have this awareness that there are additional communities, not just those today, but in the future that will have additional risks that need to be accounted for in the planning effort.
So to be clear, because I recognize, I'm very familiar with Broward County map, a lot of, not all, but a very substantial portion of those areas are lower income areas in Broward, and that's why they would qualify under an SVI metric,
Yes.
because they can't, in many cases, afford to do the mitigation. Is that accurate?
Well, they might not be able, but when you think about an impact, how able are they to navigate and recover if there is an impact? You lose your car, can you replace the car? You have damage to your home.
So that's,
Yes.
as I said, that's
Yeah,
income-based.
that
Right.
exposure.
I see,
That's
for example,
correct.
you have Broadview Park in there, which is
Yeah.
one of
Right.
my,
Yeah,
one of the
so it's not just
areas
they
I
can't
represent.
mitigate, but
Right.
when they're impacted, their exposure is greater.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Okay, so that is the end of that section. So the web-based platform, this is not yet live, but it's giving you a visualization of how this will work, how we anticipate. So you've got a landing page. You can explore storm scenarios, solutions, and view the full plan. We'll have, you know, kind of a quick links page, but this is built upon another model that already exists for something that Hazen did up in the New York area, so it will work very similarly. So here you can zoom into your neighborhood and you can select the conditions under which you want to look at storm exposures or flood exposures, I should say. So there are other tools like this, of course, like flood factor, where people can put in their home, but those are kind of fixed scenarios and they're not built upon hydrologic modeling. Like our work is very local. So you can look at 2-3 foot sea level rise, you can look at different storm intensities, 10, 25, 50-year storm. You can look at storm surge conditions and average and supersaturated groundwater, and how does the flood exposure change with that in that analysis. Then you can compare scenarios. So obviously we're not looking at 7 feet of sea level rise, but you'll be able to compare. So someone wants to look at 2 versus 3, and you can do a side by side. Then you can take those same and add in the adaptation scenarios or look at critical analysis and say, okay, so how does my condition improve under these situations? And so there's still going to be flood risk. It's not going to go away completely, especially under the worst, but we can say, how far do the adaptation improvements take us? Okay, so that's essentially how the viewer will work. And then there will be another viewer for people who are practitioners that's more project specific and can be updated and uploaded with the project information as it advances, including timelines and project costs and so forth. So what next? So the no action model scenario that from a hydrologic standpoint is complete, the economics is complete. Working on the first cut based upon those regions, remember, in terms of adaptation alternatives this winter. We'll have the first workshops probably in January, February. Economic benefits have to follow the adaptation improvement, so that'll come in spring. Web platform development underway to support the whole housing of all of that. And then the project finalization, I think we're lagging a little bit, but you know, it'll be,
If you still have to do
well,
a
it's
lot of
24.
stuff, you're not going to be done by June 2023.
Yeah, 24 at minimum, and it'll take us a little bit beyond that. Okay, so that's the resilience plan.
My head hurts. Please go on.
Sorry, this is because we spent all that time on the groundwater map last time. So on the CNSF project, basically what I want to say here is that the Corps went through a process called vertical alignment, where they had to justify what we're requesting in the way of a waiver. So the 216 study that was funded is only for $3 million, and that's the high priority, basically the salinity control structures and so forth in the Miami-Dade Palm Beach area as a priority. But the $3 million isn't enough for the study, so a waiver is needed. The Corps was finally able to come to a proposal that was accepted through what they call their vertical team, and they got vertical alignment on the scope, the budget, and the timeline for the amended project. And that's needed in order to gain authorization, acceptability for the additional funds.
The amended project is just the canals in Dade, Broward, and southern Palm Beach.
Right,
correct?
right. And the amended budget is for 11.3 million. At one point in time, it was almost 20 million, and the Corps said, no, we're not going to advance it at that level. You need to, you know, refine things, tighten it. So the team came back. They have it now an 11.3 million. It was signed off in Jacksonville, and it went up to Atlanta. What we understand, so we've been waiting for this approval in Atlanta and then at headquarters, and then it needs to be signed off by the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works. What we just learned a week ago is that there's a new requirement. And the new requirement is that
Say, Mother, may I?
the studies have to provide the project design at the 30% design level, which requires more engineering. And what I hear from Lenny is 30% design is like 90%. They call it 30, but it's almost like all the way. So that means more money is required to get to that, or you'll end up with fewer projects as part of the recommendations, because there won't be enough money to take all the project elements to the 30% design. So now the Corps,
Doctor, if they turn down the 19 million, which is the last number I remember, and now they're putting in a 30% requirement, which should be way more than the 19 million
Right.
that they've already turned down.
likely.
This is not good news at all, is it?
It is not good news. So here's what's happening is that the South Florida Water Management District is pursuing additional funds to help with the additional work. And we should know in March, well, no, that's not true. We should know this month. I don't know why, there's something else in March. We should know by the second week of November what's happening with this conversation, and it might require that we talk about capital project investment, cost share support of some kind at the county levels to help support the project development in the way that we need.
Do you have any idea of what the cost is for the 30/90%? My
No.
guess is you're talking close to 100 million?
No, I don't think it's that, but it could be it could be back over at the 20+ million again.
It's gotta be way
So-
over that.
So what will happen, and I know that the Water Management District also has a legislative request in at another level. So there's a couple of requests that they're pursuing, but we should be able to have a conversation in about 2 weeks about strategy moving forward, and that's all I can say about that.
Parks and houseboats.
Yeah, they will have had a
Continue.
conversation with the Atlanta office, and we'll know where that sits. In the meantime, we're still, what we need to have happen is that there's enough of a nodding of heads that they would expect, have adequate confidence that the 30% design can be met through these additional resources that the district may be able to bring to the project, and with enough of a strategy to get there. And this is happening not only to this project, but every other project that the Corps is working on currently, because I guess they've got into the situation where they find that the capital construction costs are larger than what's been revealed in this phase of the study, and they're trying to hedge against growing capital costs that they didn't anticipate. So hopefully that conversation would go adequately well, because what we still need is support for this waiver, because the Corps cannot internally appropriate additional funds to this project without that approval for the waiver, and all that has to happen in March. Not only the authorization, or excuse me, the additional internal appropriation, but in addition to that, we also need an appropriation for the comprehensive study that needs to move in parallel with the 216, and that needs to happen in March also. So there's a lot that is happening right now, very active, where we're, and of course our Office of Intergovernmental Affairs and our whole team is involved with that again, and we'll be looking to get additional mayor letters, and we're working on it, but the next couple weeks are very critical, and it may influence our own budget conversation.
Dr. Hirado, you have significantly depressed me today on multiple areas. I'm going to ask you to move ahead because we're done
Yeah.
in 11 minutes. I'm going to ask you, we're going to have to finish at the next
Yeah.
meeting. I would like you to discuss the Compact Summit. So
Okay.
if you can just go straight to that,
Yep.
and then we'll take
That's
5
fine.
minutes of questions.
Yep. So the summit's going to be held on the 16th and 17th. Lots of speakers. Go online to take a look at that. I just wanted to highlight, these are kind of a summary of the main sessions outside of our elected officials and the county administrators. These are the more of the non-governmental conversations. Quite diverse. I love the one with the young man here, Teen Talk, There's No Planet B and I'm Not Moving to Mars. So that'll be good. Now, Michael Connor, the Assistant Secretary of the Army, who needs to sign off on the vertical alignment, is the keynote speaker on Thursday, I believe. And so it's an opportunity for our leadership to get in front of him and impress once more how much support we need from the Corps on this project. And that's it. Okay.
Dr. Hirado, you know I like you, but you have substantially depressed me today.
But it is not my doing.
But you did. By the way, I chair the Urban and Community Affairs Committee of Florida Association of Counties, which is meeting on Tampa the exact same days as that compact,
Okay, yeah.
the FAC Legislative
Yes.
Conference. I have 11 questions, which would take the entire remaining time, so I will amend this by not asking any of them, to give other members a chance to have any questions or comments. Mr. Bell, followed by Mr. Hart.
As a general question, overall, does the sea level rise during the high tides in October, the king tides, is that treated differently overall, or is there, is there more impact that's being taken into consideration, or is the impact based on a just general rise over the entire year?
Yeah, you have a general rise, and so when you have the king tide, that could be another 12 or so inches. When that occurs, we'll account for that additional high tide. Whether or not the king tide grows from 12 inches to 16, I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is that just based upon the predictions, our observations are always higher, but the predictions are, of course, based upon historical conditions. And so it's all, there's that the thermal warming is clearly creating expansion of the water. And so maybe those high tides that were typically 12 to 16 inches are going to be 18 to 20. It makes sense, but I can't give you an accurate answer.
Thank you.
Okay, let me ask, because we have a total
I'll
of 8
explore it,
minutes
though.
before we adjourn. So, besides Mr. Hart, are there who else wishes? Okay, Mr. Hart, Commissioner Good, anyone else? Okay, so on this topic, I only see Mr. Hart, Commissioner Good, and we will then save the rest of our questions. I've got an hour's worth, so we'll save these for the next meeting, and then I'll call on Commissioner Biederman, and then we're done. Is there anybody else that, I'm trying to set this so that when I don't call on you later, nobody gets to complain. So the only people I will be calling on are Mr. Hart, Commissioner Good. We're done with this then. Come up again at our next meeting, and then Commissioner Biederman. You're recognized, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Senator. Real quick, first, I just want to comment on the resiliency study. Really pleased to see the slide and the evaluation of pre-storm drawdown and pre-storm operations. I think that's critical. I think that's a big opportunity to gain storage where there's not any open space, and I'm really glad to see that in your study. Some of these I'll take offline with county staff or the consultant, but I'm interested in the slide you showed with the 20% increase on the rainfall and how that factors into your modeling. I'd like to get some more information on that. And just to Chair Geller's point on the ordinances are in place, I would also just comment there's some grants that have also been awarded, mainly some brick grants that South Florida has gotten that include some significant resiliency measures, especially in the C9 along the south side of the county. I think they're going to be game changers for those communities, and I'm sure that's going to be included in your future conditions modeling. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Commissioner Good.
Thank you, Senator. So, Mr. Otto, is it possible you can go back to the slides that are not included in the package here that was kind of showing the risks, sort of, I guess, on these communities, and go further back a little bit more? So this one will do fine. But when we're looking at the current SLR and 3.3 foot SLR, those map stairs, what's interesting is that, we see that there's sort of a, demonstrated risk in the Southwest Broward area. And I'm assuming that's because Southwest Broward is probably a very strong source of information provided for the modeling.
I think it's also because of the C9 canal, which we're hoping to, you said, deal with.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, there's the C9, there's the C11, and then there are other canals as you go further north. And because my question is that I'm very familiar with Western Broward, and it's not that much different than the Southwest Broward area that's being depicted here on the map. I mean, the densities, the build outs, a very similar type of drainage structures are required in order to move water from the west to the east, and who knows if it's going into the Everglades. I don't know about that. But I'm just wondering, what this immediately brings to me is, what is the quality of some of the other input data that goes into this model? Because certainly on the east, it's clear that there's a lot of, constant good information. But as you go further west, it just seems like I just asked that question, what kind of input are you getting from some of these other agencies that are responsible for the drainage systems?
So,
By definition, any information that we get from you is good information. Please continue.
yeah. So, I would allow, and I don't know if Janine will be able to speak to the details. Clearly, they have their hydrologic modeler who knows what additional information is provided. What I do want to say is that this is the same model that is used. It was our baseline model for the county integrated surface groundwater model. It's the same one that FEMA used. It's the same one that then the district picked up and further improved for the level of service analyses that are being undertaken. And we've taken all of the improvements that the water management district made, brought the model back, and updated even further. So I do know that we receive incredible data from the South Broward Drainage District for sure. I also know that Weston sits slightly higher. It does, I think, have some newer infrastructure and lots of pumps in place, and so you probably don't see the exact same exposures that you have further south where.
More concerned about Pembroke Pines.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually interested about the Western Broward.
Yeah.
As you go north from Pembroke Pines, there's a lot of similar.
But do you mean north like Weston and Sunrise, or do you mean north like Coral
they're not.
Springs?
No, he's talking about Miramar, Southwest Ranches, Davie, Cooper
Yeah,
City.
and of course we know Southwest Ranches sits very, very low. So that, does add to some of those exposures, but you're saying it's not as dark blue. I think that the issue has been in large part what happens with the C9 canal, the contributions of the water levels in the C9 to not allow, it's been, Kevin, I don't know what else you would say about it. You've looked at the data, but I can't say anything beyond what I just now did if we'd have to have Guillermo.
Okay, since we have to end in 2 minutes, Commissioner Good, I'll ask you to bring this up again at
Can we
our
have Guillermo
next
present?
meeting. Dr. Gerardo, I'll make one comment only very quickly. I think we need more listening sessions. I would particularly ask you, because those, I assume, are mostly, the water advocates that have attended. I'd like if you can reach out to the business community, the Alliance, the workshops, the chambers of commerce. I'd also ask you if you could reach out to the, homeowners associations, the elected officials, because I know frequently you talk to other water professionals, and this happens a lot, and the elected officials don't really know what's going on. So maybe you can make this presentation, or not you personally, but have you and Greg and others share these at some city commission meetings, or perhaps we can call some elected officials. All right, we're done with this. Last person, Commissioner Biederman. Yes. Mike.
Sorry. Just to follow up on our septic tank conversion discussions, we're about to connect 250 convert septic tank, 250 septic tanks to city sewer, all of which are surrounding raw water well fields, either for Hollywood or Pembroke Pines.
Good job. Thank you. If there is no further business to come in front of us, yes.
Sir, one last thing on a positive note to end.
Okay.
Tomorrow is a big day, I understand.
No, it's not. I turn 65 tomorrow, and I keep waiting for somebody to come up and say, "You're retired. Get out of here." Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
For letting us know that.
Yes.
And we have cake to share
Okay.
for everybody. Yeah, absolutely, we have cake.
Oh, you have cake. Okay.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Everybody on their mics. Happy birthday.
Here's
Senator, everybody.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank Thank you. I will note that this is not the Boys and Girls Choir. Thank you. I appreciate the kind thoughts, and please show us adjourned.